honest story.
David Johnson, a 32-year-old black man, intelligent, humorous, but nothing particularly remarkable to draw attention. He dresses simply and modestly, and has just started his first job at a large financial company. David has big dreams of working in finance, but due to racial discrimination throughout his job search, he couldn't get the right opportunity. However, he decided not to let those prejudices affect him, and he continues to seek opportunities even as just an ordinary employee. William Carter, the CEO of Westbridge Holdings, a 50-something white man, confident, arrogant, and always believing that people who look like him deserve leadership positions. He always thought that black people could never achieve the same level of success as he did. Sarah Whitmore, a senior employee at the company, young, intelligent, and fairly neutral. She disagrees with William's views but remains professional in her work. Sarah begins to take notice of David and realizes that he is a person with special abilities. Other employees, a group of people working in the company, from receptionists to mid-level managers, they will become witnesses to the surprising change that occurs when David shows up and starts working at the company, the first day at Westbridge Holdings. On his first day at Westbridge Holdings, David Johnson stepped into the building with a mix of hope and anxiety. He had spent months preparing for this day, the day he believed would be the fresh start to his financial career. After all his hard work and patience, David was finally hired to work at one of the biggest companies in the financial industry. Despite knowing he could contribute valuable insights, he couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling brewing in his chest. He wasn't just a new employee. He was someone who didn't quite fit in at a company where most employees came from the upper echelons of society with vast networks. David wore a simple, modest suit and carried an ordinary briefcase. He wanted to look polished, but not flashy, because just one small mistake could get him judged. He silently thought to himself, "Today is the day I prove myself." However, as he stepped into the grand lobby of the company, an unfamiliar feeling immediately hit him. Everything around him felt foreign: the luxurious atmosphere, the modern architecture, and the glittering chandelier lights. But what truly made him feel like an outsider were the strange, judgmental glances from the people walking around the lobby. They didn't see him as a new colleague, but as someone different, someone who didn't belong there. Though he couldn't fully explain why, he knew this feeling was real. He could feel the eyes scanning him, as if wondering, "Who is this guy?" When he approached the receptionist desk, he saw a white receptionist with blonde-dyed hair, dressed in a classy uniform, sitting there with a cold expression. David hesitated for a moment, wondering whether he should speak or not. He adjusted his briefcase and smiled before walking up to the desk. He tried his best to maintain a professional demeanor, not letting his nerves show. Receptionist, glancing up, then looking back at her computer screen. "Sorry, who are you? Can I help you with something?" The receptionist's question caught David off guard. He was wearing business attire and holding a briefcase, which clearly wasn't typical of a delivery person or any other support staff. But she didn't show any sign of recognition. She simply glanced at him briefly, then turned back to her work. David smiled faintly, not wanting to escalate the tension further. He took a deep breath before introducing himself. David, smiling gently. "I'm David Johnson, the new employee here. I was asked to report to the boss." The receptionist didn't change her expression. She didn't smile, nor was she surprised. She just nodded vaguely, silently typing a few keys on the computer without responding. David stood there for a moment, sensing the indifference from her. He began to feel like he was being treated as an outsider, as if he didn't really belong here. But rather than feeling upset or giving up, he decided to break the ice with a bit of humor, something he knew would help ease the tension. David, playfully tilting his head. "Actually, I'm the new CEO of the company. I came to meet everyone. I think I'm a bit late, but it's no big deal." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment, sizing him up, as if trying to figure out whether he was joking or being serious. Her eyes widened for a second before, unsure whether it was due to surprise or just hesitation, she responded, "Receptionist," half believing, half doubting. "Oh, really? All right. Please head to the boss's office." David shrugged, smiling lightly, and nodded. Whether or not the receptionist truly believed him, or was just reluctantly agreeing, at least he had broken the cold wall between them. She quickly gave him directions, and David followed her, walking down the long hallway toward the meeting rooms. However, his steps weren't as confident as he wished. Even though he kept reassuring himself, everything will be fine, the feeling of being an outsider clung to him every step of the way. He couldn't help but notice the skeptical glances from people passing by. They weren't looking at him with respect, as he had imagined, but with a touch of doubt. It was as if they were silently asking, "Who is this guy? Why is he here?" That feeling was like an invisible wall surrounding him. David knew he didn't have much to prove, just his briefcase and simple suit. But he also knew that he couldn't let this unease overpower him. He walked faster, determined to assert himself and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the meeting room. As David entered the meeting room, he immediately sensed a thick air of tension. The whole room was filled with a serious atmosphere, and David could almost feel the prejudices reflected in the eyes of the people around him. Even though this was his first time in an official company meeting room, the feeling of being different persisted. He was the only one with a less impressive appearance, wearing a simple suit, while everyone else was dressed in tailored outfits, exuding an air of wealth and power. No one greeted him warmly, especially not William Carter, the company's CEO, who sat at the head of the table, his face stern and cold. When David entered, William's gaze didn't even shift. His eyes remained focused on the documents in front of him, showing no signs of courtesy or even acknowledgement. As David stepped into the room, all eyes turned toward him. Those eyes weren't friendly. A few employees sneered, others furrowed their brows, as if thinking, "Who does he think he is?" William Carter eyed him carefully, then slowly spoke, his voice firm with a touch of sarcasm. "William, you've arrived. I've heard about you. A new guy, huh? Looks like we have a delivery person here." David was taken aback by his words. He hadn't expected to be treated this way, but he understood that racial prejudice wasn't only visible on the surface, it was also embedded in people's underlying biases. However, instead of feeling insulted or stepping back, David decided to respond cleverly. He played along with the situation naturally and added a bit of humor. David, smiling lightly, not flustered. "Yes, I thought I might be delivering something, but I didn't bring the coffee. Anyway, I'm here to get some real work done." The comment made the room pause for a second, and a few people couldn't help but chuckle quietly. William's eyes started to twinkle, but he maintained his serious demeanor. The employees around them didn't realize that David wasn't just a delivery guy. He was someone with a much bigger plan. He wasn't someone to be judged by his appearance, and he had full confidence in his abilities. David took a seat at the table, his calm presence unshaken. As the others continued to look at him skeptically, David decided it was time to change their view of him. He leaned in with confidence, starting to discuss his insights into the company's financial situation and future strategies. No one had expected him to be so sharp and to offer such bold proposals. Meeting an unexpected development. David, in a calm, confident tone, "I think the company could adjust its marketing strategy a bit. We need to focus more on building a sustainable brand, not just relying on the current products. We should also work with bigger partners, corporations that can create breakthroughs in technology and innovation. But of course, this is just a small idea. If everyone agrees, we can discuss it in detail." The atmosphere in the room suddenly changed. The employees who had been mocking and undervaluing David began to pay attention. Sarah Whitmore, one of the more experienced employees in the company, watched him intently. Sitting next to David, she couldn't help but notice the confidence and professionalism in his presentation. She realized that even though he appeared to be just a new hire, he had sharp financial strategies and a clear vision for the company's growth. She began to feel surprised and impressed by him. Sarah looked around and realized that not just her, but others in the room were also starting to feel amazed by what David had just said. They realized that David wasn't just a regular employee. His ideas weren't just intelligent, they were practical and relevant, something they hadn't considered before. Some even started taking notes on the points David had raised. For the first time that day, they were really paying attention to him. William sat silently, trying to hide the surprise that was becoming more evident on his face. He couldn't deny that David had real potential and had a much clearer vision of the company's future than the longtime employees. William, trying to keep a stern face, "Well, your ideas are interesting, but I think they need further review before implementation. We might need more data and market research before we make a final decision." David nodded politely, but inside, he felt a surge of satisfaction. He knew that as long as he held his ground and continued to demonstrate his worth, no one would be able to dismiss him again. As for Sarah, sitting next to him, her opinion of David had completely changed. She realized that he wasn't just a new hire, he was someone with great potential. She couldn't help but feel admiration for his confidence and decisiveness. She now believed that if he were given the chance, he would become an indispensable part of the company's success. After an hour of intense discussions and skepticism from the board members, the atmosphere remained unchanged. Everyone still looked at David Johnson with surprise and disbelief. His bold financial ideas had made an impact, but it still wasn't enough to make the others completely change their attitudes. William Carter, with his usual confident and smug expression, remained silent, not showing any excitement about David's suggestions. He still wasn't comfortable with David's presence in the meeting room, and that's when the big twist happened. The door to the meeting room suddenly swung open dramatically, and Charles Dunham, a senior executive at the company, walked in holding a thick folder. The entire room turned to look at Charles, and everyone could sense that he had something important to announce. Meanwhile, William remained seated, but his expression grew more tense than ever, as if sensing that something was about to go awry. Charles, calmly but with authority, "Sorry to interrupt, but I have an important announcement regarding the company's leadership." The room fell silent, and all eyes were on Charles. It seemed that a new announcement was about to be made, but no one expected it to be such a shocking revelation. While the other employees exchanged curious glances, William started to look worried, though he didn't show it outwardly. Charles, placing the folder down on the table and glancing around. "After a private meeting with the shareholders, we have decided to appoint Mr. David Johnson as the new CEO of the company." The room fell dead silent. Everyone stared at David. No one spoke a word. People looked at each other, their eyes wide, in disbelief. David stared at the folder on the table, feeling like he was dreaming. He sat still, his expression unchanged, but inside, his emotions were racing. He looked around the room, and it felt as though everything around him had suddenly become surreal. David, smiling lightly, pretending to be surprised. "Oh, really?" William stood up, his face draining of color. His eyes widened, and he couldn't say a word. The feeling that his entire career was crumbling right before his eyes was overwhelming. "William," his voice trembling, "what? How is this possible?" David didn't rush to respond. He just sat there, smiling at William. He could see the shock on the previous CEO's face. David didn't say anything more, allowing the shock of everyone in the room to set in. Charles, calmly continuing, "That's right. David Johnson is not just a new employee here. He is also the largest shareholder of this company." William froze. Everything he had built, everything he had controlled for years, was suddenly being taken away by David. David had quietly acquired the majority of the company's shares without anyone in the room knowing. It was a shocking revelation that no one could have imagined. William couldn't speak. The entire room remained silent again. The employees who had once looked at David with suspicion were now looking at him with respect and admiration. Everyone began to realize that David was not just an ordinary employee. He was now the most powerful person in the company. David remained seated, his expression calm, smiling lightly as he turned toward those who were now looking at him with admiration. David, with a humorous smile, but still confident. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to try this out. I hope I'll do a good job, though I wasn't exactly prepared to be CEO." The room erupted in laughter. Everyone laughed, but not because of David's joke. It was because of the surprise and the dramatic change in the situation. The feeling of disbelief slowly turned into satisfaction and admiration. No one had ever thought that someone like David, who they had once dismissed as unimportant, could turn the tables in such an outstanding way. The employees who had previously considered David as a mere laborer now felt embarrassed and surprised by the sudden and bold shift. David had not only proven his intelligence, but his foresight and vision had led him to take control of something they had always taken for granted. William, after standing there in shock for a few moments, suddenly realized that everything had changed. He was no longer in control. His once stronghold was now slipping away, all because of David's financial decision. Prejudices can lead people to misjudge a person's true value. David wasn't just someone different. He was someone with great potential and a clear plan. The people in the meeting room had initially only seen his exterior, but it was his intelligence and talent that completely changed the situation, forcing them to reassess their judgment. Never judge someone by their appearance. Everyone looked at David as someone unworthy, but he proved that even ordinary people can create massive changes. Judging people based on their appearance often leads to missed opportunities and untapped potential. Humor and confidence can help you break down any barriers. David didn't let racial prejudices or biases hold him back. He used humor and confidence not only to change others' perceptions of him, but also to overcome all the prejudices he had to face. Have you ever been misjudged because of your appearance? Share your thoughts about this story in the comments, and let's discuss it.